As a runner, one of my favorite films is Chariots of Fire. The film talks about the 1924 Olympic team, specifically the British Olympic team that did incredibly well in track and field that year. The movie focuses in on two particular members of that team. One being Scotsman and missionary Eric Liddell. A lot of Eric's journey throughout the film is dealing with how to show forth his faith in his running, in spite of all the world around him wishes him to do. The major conflict of this is that he's asked to run a heat for his race, the 100-meter dash, on Sunday. He doesn't want to do this because of his faith. He doesn't want to do this because it would overshadow the work he is doing as a missionary. And thankfully, the issue is resolved when another member of the team, who has just won his own medal in the Olympics, offers Eric his spot on the 400-meter race. Now, throughout the film, we see Eric give various sermons throughout his time, various talks and readings in church. Many of these are accompanied either by his running or by scenes of others running. And during the Olympics, there he is on a Sunday reading from a passage of Isaiah. And part of that passage that Eric reads is the passage that we just read this very morning. And as Eric is reading this passage, we get cuts of scenes of his fellow teammates in their own races. Each of them is struggling at this time. This is a difficult time for his teammates. And it's as we see his fellow runners struggling, we get the end of this passage that Eric reads from Isaiah. The very end of the passage that we read today. The words of that passage are this: they shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. It's very powerful to have these words as the ones we see, all these hardships, the other runners, the other teammates of Eric are facing. Having this juxtaposition helps, because it helps us see what Eric has been trying to tell his listeners, tell us even, throughout the film. Because there's another time we hear Eric talk. This is right after he's won a big race. And in his talk to the people gathered around him, he accepts that there are difficulties that all of his listeners are facing, that they may be facing. He says to them, go home, maybe your dinner's burned. Maybe you haven't got a job. Eric ends this talk by speaking to the power of Jesus in the midst of all these difficulties. He reminds his listeners that the kingdom of God is within you. He asks them this question as he reaches the end of his talk with them after this race. Where does the power come to see the race to its end? From within. From within is that Spirit of God, the kingdom of God, that resides in the midst of all of us. That's the hope that Eric is trying to instill. As his teammates struggle with their running, as his listeners struggle with their lives at home, he gives them the hope that we have of God dwelling within us. That same hope is the hope we see in our reading from Isaiah, the very same reading that Eric reads in the movie. Now, this passage in Isaiah that we read from today is a section of the book that we generally call 2nd Isaiah. And it's because this passage is part of a section of that book that wasn't written by the original prophet Isaiah, but a prophet of the same school, the same way of thinking that came after him. Now, the original prophet Isaiah is speaking to the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Israel before these other great empires sweep in to take it over and to remove the Israelites from their home, leading to what we know as the exile. 2nd Isaiah is speaking in this period of exile. While this exile happens because the Israelites fail to listen to God, the words of 2nd Isaiah are meant to be a hope for these people. Yes, times seem dark. Yes, they're away from their homeland, away from all they knew. But the assurance that 2nd Isaiah gives the Israelites is that God does still care, even in the midst of this darkness. God still cares about what happens to the Israelites. God is still there in the midst of them. And even being in the midst of them, God is giving them the hope and promise that this darkness will end, that the Israelites will return to their homeland. And this promise is seen at the very end of the book of Isaiah, with a section called 3rd Isaiah, the post-exile, the return of the Israelites to their home. Isaiah is trying to give us the hope in this portion of 2nd Isaiah, that God is still with us, even in the dark times we face. And that hope is the same hope that Eric is trying to spread to others well over a millennium later. The hope we see in 2nd Isaiah and in Eric is that even in the darkness, God is there with us. Even when we despair, even when it seems like everything in the world around us is crashing down upon us, God still cares and is in the midst with us, even through that pain. God is there to help us through the dark times, even when they don't end as soon as we would like them to. Because those bad times do come to an end. It does take time, though, and that can lead to that anxiousness, that increased sense of despair. But by telling us that with God, we can run the race and not be weary, God is reminding us that even in those times, God is there with us. We can hold on to that hope. We can listen to the words of 2nd Isaiah and Eric Little. Then we can make it through with that strength to see the end of the race. At the very least, when we face our darkness, when we face our despair, when we want to break down and just cry, we can know that even in that pain, even in that suffering, God is there with us. The Creator of the world cares about what we're going through. And when we want to break down and cry, God is there to have that